two classes, mostly because of my fault. I think in one case I was held up at work, and in the second case, I believe I just forgot. So because Wednesday was new, I didn't have it in my reminder schedule. So we are going to be resuming the discussion on the concluding part of the 12th chapter, 6th canto. This is Indra kills Vritrasur. And just to do a quick recap, the chapter starts with a battle between Vritrasur and Indra, and Vritrasur essentially getting the upper hand. So Indra is very much discouraged, and seeing Indra standing on the field, unwilling to wield his weapons, especially the Vajra that was created by the bones of the Rishi Rishi, Vritrasur speaks a set of verses which are meant to enlighten Indra. And also very, very important verses. They talk about the importance of duty. They talk about the importance of bhakti. So in the 11 verses, it's almost like Vritrasur gives a summary of the Bhagavad Gita. And beginning from the 18th verse are nice verses of glorification from Indra to Vritrasur. So we are resuming from verse 22, which is the last verse in that section. Yasya bhaktir bhagavati harau niha shraya shrevare vikritato mrita bodhau kim kshudre khatapodakhe. A person fixed in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord Hari, the Lord of the highest auspiciousness, swims in the ocean of nectar. For him, what is the use of the water in small ditches? So this is the concluding verse of Indra appreciating the quality of Vritrasur. And he compares bhakti with everything that is not bhakti. And he says bhakti is like swimming in ocean. And everything other than bhakti is like small ditches. If you remember in the Nectar of Devotion, the devotees are compared to sharks. And the reasons that are given is that the sharks, they swim in the deep water of the oceans. And so the devotees, they relish in the deep, deep mellows of bhakti. They're not interested in the shallow chapal sukh that comes from karma gyan or the other processes. Yeah, Indra is also comparing the conception of Vritrasur with his own conception. So one thing that is appreciable about Indra is that he knows his adhikar very well. And he's constantly striving to so not out of ignorance. So one thing is that people out of ignorance might say, just leave me as it is. And that's more a situation, tamogun. Indra is obviously not in that, but acting from your factual platform is also one of the catalysts for bhakti. And if you remember in the 10th canto, 14th chapter, I believe it's the third verse, where Brahma glorifies those who execute devotional service while remaining in their position. And to some extent, that glorification is for the Varnashram Dharma, basically the Devi Varnashram, where while staying at one's Varna and ashram, one executes devotional service. Also, it's a nod to one being aware of their adhikar. So when uh, Indra was and the Devas, when they were praying in front of Lord Vishnu, so while they had started, Indra had started off glorifying the transcendental qualities of the Lord and his devotees. At one point, he had gotten worried that the Lord may get too much taken in by all this appreciation of Shuddha Bhakti and award him Shuddha Bhakti. And Indra immediately says, but for me, I want, and then basically what he wants to regain his rule of Swarga, he wants Dhritarashtra to be killed, right? So that's him saying that I'm not ready for pure devotional service. Here also we see the same mood. That while Indra is appreciating Dhritarashtra, one might say that then there's no need for you to fight. That you consider Dhritarashtra to be an exalted personality, just walk away from the battlefield. Or better still, follow the instructions of Dhritarashtra and perform pure devotional service. And so Indra is not prepared to do that. So he is saying that I understand that as a devotee, you swim in the ocean of nectar, but as for me, I am hankering after the water in the small ditches. Right? So, in a way, it's demeaning, but it is also honest. And that's what makes him qualified to return back to Godhead eventually. That he's honest about where he is, and from that platform, he makes progress. So Prabhupada writes that a pure devotee is never attracted to any exalted position within this material world. Simply wants to associate with the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Right? Later on, he said that any material happiness is like water in a ditch. Spiritual happiness is like an ocean of nectar. Okay, verse 23. श्रीसुकवाच इति ब्रुवाणाम् अन्योन्याम् धर्मजिज्ञासया नृप युद्धाते महावीर्या इंद्रवृत्राव युधाम्पति. Sri Sukdev Goswami said, Vritrasur and King Indra spoke about devotional service even on the battlefield, and then, as a matter of duty, they again began fighting. My dear king, both of them were great fighters and were equally powerful. So Sukdev Goswami is now explicitly stating why did Indra not walk away from the battlefield. Right, so he says that he began fighting as a matter of duty. Right? So very similar to Arjun's position in the battle of Kurukshetra. Initially, there was so much that he was confused about, and then when he heard Bhagavad Gita, he simply fought out of because it was his duty. And we see both aspects of dharma in play on this battlefield. So we see Dhritarashtra fighting because of bhakti, and we see Indra fighting because of dharma. Right? So obviously Dhritarashtra is at a much higher platform, but externally they are both performing a similar action. Sukdev Goswami also says that they talk about bhakti even on the battlefield. So talks about the independence of bhakti. Battlefield is in the mode of passion and ignorance. people are angry, just like Indra and both Vritrasur were angry, and there's killing, ghastliness, right? Not the best place to have transcendental talk. But Krishna Katha is that rather than it being contaminated, it purifies where it appears. Verse 24. Avidya parigamvritaha karshanasyam arindamaha indraya prahahino ghoram vamhaste namarisha. O Maharaj Parikshit, Vritrasur, who was completely able to subdue his enemy, took his iron club, whirled it around, aimed it at Indra, and threw it at him with his left hand. So why did he throw it with his left hand? Because earlier on we see that Indra by throwing the Vajra had cut off his right hand. Right? Sukadeva Goswami, he calls Vritrasur Arindamaha. That Arindama means that even with this situation that his arm was cut off, he was still Arindamaha. That he was completely competent to subdue his enemy. Then the second point is that both, or rather all three, Indra, Vritrasur, as well as Sukadeva Goswami, are aware of the fact that Vritrasur's death is imminent. Vritrasur because he understood that to be the desire of Krishna. Indra, because he had now got this weapon. And Sukadeva Goswami, because he knew the past time. He is recollecting the past time, but he still calls Vritrasur as Arindama. Right? So Vishnu Chakravarti says that clearly in this, the Arinda, the enemy, is not Indra. The Sukadeva Goswami does not refer to Indra as the enemy. So then what does it mean that Vritrasur is Arindama? So Vishnu Chakravarti says that the real enemy is having material conceptions in the service of the Lord. And the fact that Vritrasur was standing in this battlefield, encouraging Indra to kill him, and still fighting with all his vigor, means that he had completely transcended material conceptions. So when he's called Arindama, he's called as the one who has overcome that enemy of material conceptions. Verse 25. Satu vritrasya parigama karam cha karamopamam shisheda yugapaddevo vajrena shatparvana. With his thunderbolt named Shatparvan, Indra simultaneously cut to pieces Vritrasur's club and his remaining hand. So the Vajra that was made out of the bones of the Dachi is also known as Shatparvana. So Shat means 100 and Parvana means joints. So so it was basically constructed to have 100 joints. So previously the right arm of Vritrasur was cut. So he had used his left hand to throw the club, and Indra, he at the same time cuts the club as well as the remaining hand. So here we see that that the left hand is compared to the trunk of an elephant, and previously the right arm was compared to the gray stake, Vasuki. Verse 26. Durbhyam utkata moolabhyam babao rakta sarvo suraha छिन्न पक्षो यथा गोत्रः खाद्भ्रष्टो वज्रनाहतः. Vritrasur, bleeding profusely, his two arms cut off at the root, looked very beautiful, like a flying mountain whose wings have been cut to pieces by Indra. So this is a very interesting rasa. It's called Ghor Madhurya, which is appreciating beauty and ghastliness. Right. So one might look at the person with arms cut off, blood gushing from them, and one may feel a lot of revulsion. But Sukadev Goswami is seeing beauty here, right? And this is so we see that in uh, uh, around ourselves also. So, for instance, a child might come back from playing outside, and the child is all covered with mud, and the mother will just think that the child is so charming, so cute, all covered with mud. Similarly, a doctor may inspect some other surgeon making a very precise surgical cut, and they'll say, "Wow, this is really good, very nice." In Mahabharata, we see very often when great warriors are fighting and they're inflicting a lot of hurt on each other, the other warriors are actually applauding. They're appreciating the skills in fighting. So similarly, Sukhdev Goswami here is taking on more of that mood, that he sees the enormous body of Vritrasur lying in the battlefield without any hands and blood flowing out, and he says that it's looking extremely beautiful. So he compares it with Indra cutting the wings of flying mountains. Right? So this is an ancient pastime that wherein mountains could fly. And earlier it was okay, but as the civilization increased and the humans started following villages and cities, the mountains would suddenly come and rest, and they would essentially squash under them people. So they all pray to Indra. So with the Vajra, Indra cut down the wings of the mountains. In Ramayana Sundarkand, actually, there is this pastime when Hanuman is jumping across to Lanka, the 800 miles. Then Mainika mountain offers him a place to rest. And at that time, Mainik mountain says to Hanuman that he says, "Oh Hanuman, I am Mainak the mountain. In the ancient times, the mountains used to fly. Indra, fearing disaster, cut off our wings. But I was saved by Vayu, your father, and thus I owe a debt to him." So this appears in Sudarkand, first chapter of Ramayana. Of course, Hanuman touches the mountain out of respect, but does not rest over there. Okay. Verse 27, 28, 29. Mahaprano Mahaviryo Mahasarpiva Dvipam Kritva Dharam Hanum Bhumau Daityadevutaраmanum Navo Gambhir Vaktrena Leliho Laban Jivaya Damstrabhi Kalkalpabhi Krasanniva Jagatrayam Atimatra Mahakaya Akshipam Tarasa Girin Girirata Pachairiva Padabhyam Nirjarayam Mahim Jagrasa Samasadhya Vajranam Sahavahanam. Vitnasu was very powerful in physical strength and influence. He placed his lower jaw on the ground and his upper jaw in the sky. His mouth became very deep like the sky itself, and his tongue resembled a huge serpent. With his fearful teeth, death-like teeth, he seemed to try to devour the entire universe. Thus, assuming a gigantic body, the great demon Vitrasur shook even the mountains and began crushing the surface of the earth with his legs, as if he were the Himalayas walking about. He came before Indra and swallowed him and Airavata, his carrier, just as a big python might swallow an elephant. Next verse, 30. वृत्तकृतस्सं तमालोक्य सप्रजापतयः सूरा हाकशतम् इति निर्विनाश चुक्रुषा समहर्षया. When the demigods along with Brahma, other Prajapatis, and other great saintly persons saw that Indra had been swallowed by the demon, they became very morose. Alas, they lamented, what a calamity, what a calamity. Verse 31. निगृणोऽप्य अरुसेन्द्रेण नाममारोद्रं गतः महापुरुषसन्नद्धो योगमाय बलेन च. The protective armor of Narayan, which Indra possessed, was identical with Narayan himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Protected by that armor and by his own mystic power, Indra, although swallowed by Vitrasur, did not die within the demon's belly. So Vishnu Chakravarti notes over here that protected by the Narayan Kavach. So Mahapurusha can translate on Narayan Kavach and Yogamaya Balina. So Indra himself was a powerful mystic. So protected by his own mystic powers that he had gained through the performance of Astanga Yoga, Indra did not die. He remained invisible in the form of air by his powers of invisibility. Verse 32. Bhitva vajrena tatkukshevam nishkramya bala vidvibuhu uchkarta siraha satror giri shrangam ivavajasa. With his thunderbolt, Indra, who was also extremely powerful, pierced through Vitrasur's abdomen and came out. Indra, the killer of the demon Bal, then immediately cut off Vitrasur's head, which was as high as the peak of a mountain. 33. Vajratu tat kandharam asuvedah krantam samantat parivartamanaha niyapatyatavad aharganena yojotisamayan ayane vartahatye. Although the thunderbolt revolved around Vitrasur's neck with great speed, separating his head from his body, took one complete year, 360 days, the time in which the sun, moon, and other luminaries complete a northern and southern journey. Then, at the suitable time for Vitrasur to be killed, his head fell to the ground. So in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Uttarayanam is when the sun travels north, and it's called as the path of no return. And Dakshayanam is when the sun travels south, which is called the path of return. So this verse talks about Vartahatya, that a time suitable for the killing of Vitrasur when the sun has traveled both north and south. So essentially it had completed an entire year, right? That was the time it took for the Vajra to sever the neck of Vitrasur. Verse 34. Tada chakhe dundubhayu vinidyo gandharva siddha samaharshi sangaha vartragna linge stam abhistuvana Mantrer Kushumerabhyavarshan. When Vritrasur was killed, the Gandharvas and Siddhas in the heavenly planets beat kettle drums in jubilation. With Vedic hymns, they celebrated the prowess of Indra, the killer of Vritrasur, praising Indra and showering flowers upon him with great pleasure. Verse 35. Vritasya deha nishkrantam atmajyotirarindama Pashyatam sarvadevana alokam sampadyata. O King Parikshit, subduer of the enemies, the living spark then came forth from Vritrasur's body and returned home back to Godhead. While all the demigods looked on, he entered the transcendental world to become an associate of Lord Sankarshan. So Prabhupada in the purport quotes Krishna Chakravarti Thakur, and he says that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Indra, not Vritrasur, was actually killed. He says that when Vritrasur swallowed King Indra and his career, the elephant, he thought, now I have killed Indra, and therefore there is no more need of fighting. Now let me return home back to Godhead. So this is Vritrasur thinking. Thus he stopped all his bodily activities and became situated in trance. Taking advantage of the silence of Vritrasur's body, Indra pierced the demon's abdomen, and because of Vritrasur's trance, Indra was able to come out. Now Vritrasur was in Yog Samadhi, and therefore although King Indra wanted to cut his throat, the demon's neck was so stiff that Indra's thunderbolt took 360 days to cut it to pieces. Actually, it was a body left of Vritrasur that was cut to pieces by Indra. Vritrasur himself was not killed. In his original consciousness, Vritrasur returned home back to Godhead to become an associate of Lord Sankarshan. Here the word aloka means transcendental world, Vaikuntha Loka, where Sankarshan eternally resides. So this is an interesting insight that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives that Srila Prabhupada quotes, that Indra did not kill. The same point is made when Takshak bites Maharaj Parikshit. So it's said that Takshak did not kill Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit had already left his body and returned back home to Godhead. So essentially Takshak was only biting the material body left behind by Maharaj Parikshit. Same point is made for Vritrasur over here. So this brings us to the end of the 12th chapter. And quick recap. This is Vritrasur's chapter talks about the death of Vritrasur, the battle between Indra and Vritrasur, and the initial defeat of Indra, the preaching preaching by Vritrasur to Indra, the glorification of Vritrasur by Indra, the concluding battle, and then finally the glorious death of Vritrasur. So before we continue with the 13th chapter, I'll stop and see if there are any questions related to what we discussed today or just about the chapter in general. Okay, if not, then we can move on to 13th chapter. So the title of the 13th chapter is King Indra Afflicted by Sinful Reaction. 613.1 Sri Sukuvacha Vritrate Hate Trayo Loko Vinasakrena Bhurida Sapalahaya Bhavan Sadyo Vishvara Nirvatendriya. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, O King Parikshit, who are so charitably disposed when Vritrasur was killed. All the presiding deities and everyone else in the three planetary system were immediately pleased and free from trouble. Everyone, that is, except Indra. So in the previous chapter, we see that Indra went into the battle with a lot of malice towards Vritrasur. When he got defeated, that hatred actually got magnified, mixed with fear. Fear acted like fuel to his hatred. And initially, when he was once again being defeated by Vritrasur, that became even more concentrated. But then Vritrasur started speaking to Indra, and all that hatred went away. Indra realized that he was in the presence of an exalted devotee. And at that point, when Vritrasur swallowed Indra, then there was a lot of lamentation everywhere. And when he appeared by cutting the abdomen of Vritrasur, then there was a lot of encouragement. There was a lot of relief and encouragement. So even though Indra at this point was reluctant to kill Vritrasur, he was, by different reasons, he was encouraged. He understood that it was the duty. It was his duty to do so, and he was also encouraged by the sages, the other devas. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that even though it's not explicitly said in the chapter, he may be referring to some other Puranic reference. He said that the sages promised to nullify the reactions of killing Mithrasun by appropriate penances. Because Vritrasur was, at the end of the day, a Brahman. Right? He was born from a Brahman. His brother Vishwarup was a Brahman. His father Twasta was a Brahman. So he was a Brahman. Right? So Indra had concerns about Brahmatya. So Vishwanath Chakravarti said that the sages assured him that they will nullify the reaction by appropriate penances. Devarishi Pitra Bhutane Daitya Devanuga Swayam Pratikjagmo Swadhishnani Brahmasendra Dayastataha. Thereafter, the demigods, the great saintly persons, the inhabitants of Pitralok and Bhutalok, the demons, the followers of the demigods, and also Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the demigods subordinate to Indra all returned to their respective homes. While departing, however, no one spoke to Indra. So we can see that this was, so to speak, the battle of the century. That everybody was there, all the way from Lord Shiva, Brahma, to the residents of the demigods, the sages, then the middle planetary system, Pitralok, all of them were there. And when the battle was over, they went away, but none of them spoke to Indra. And Prabhupada once again quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He says that in this connection, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the other demigods returned to their respective abodes, but Indra did not, for he was disturbed at having killed Vritrasur, who was actually a Brahman. After killing Vritrasur, Indra went to Manas Sarovar lake to become free from sinful reactions. When he left the lake, he performed an Ashwamedha Yagya and then returned to his own abode. That's essentially a summary of the chapter. Verse 3, Shiraj Indriyasa Nivrittir Hitum Shrotam Ichchami Vo Mune Yena San Sukheno Deva Harer Dukham Kuto Bhava. Maharaj Parishad inquired from Sukadeva Goswami, O great sage, what was the reason for Indra's unhappiness? I wish to hear about this. When he killed Vritrasur, all the demigods were extremely happy. Why then was Indra himself unhappy? Right? So Prabhupada says that this is an intelligent question. That when a demon is killed, the demigods are happy. So in this case, when Vritrasur was killed, it was understandable that all the demigods were happy. But Indra was not happy. Why is that? So it may be suggested that Indra was unhappy because he knew that he had killed a great devotee and Brahman. Vritrasur outwardly appeared to be a demon, but inwardly he was a great devotee and therefore a great Brahman. Herein it is clearly indicated that a person who is not at all demoniac, such as Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj, may outwardly be a demon or be born in a family of demons. Therefore, in terms of real culture, one should not be considered demigod or demon simply according to birth. In his dealings with the fighting with Indra, Vritrasur proved himself to be a great devotee. After the battle, Vritrasur was transferred to Vaikuntha Lok to become an associate of Sankarsha. Indra knew this, and therefore he was morose that he had killed a Vaishnava or a Brahman. Okay, so Prabhupada makes two important points. One is that uh, from any type of birth, one may be a devotee. And he gives the example of Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj, who were born in demoniac families but were yet exalted devotees. Same thing with Vritrasur, even though his lineage was exalted, but he was born a demon because of the nature of the yajna that Tvasta had performed. But he was intrinsically a devotee. That is why Indra was unhappy that he had killed a Brahman and a Vaishnava. Prabhupada also makes this point that Vaishnava is automatically a Brahman. As he says, a millionaire may very easily possess hundreds and thousands of dollars, but a person with hundreds and thousands of dollars is not necessarily a millionaire. Right? So he makes the point that Vritrasur was a Vaishnava and therefore also a Brahman. But the opposite is not necessarily true. Verse 4, Shri Sukuvacha Vritta Vikrama Samvigna Sarvedeva Sarishibhi Tadvadhayarthayanendram Naichadbhitu Brahadvadat. Shri Sukadeva Goswami answered, when all the great sages and demigods were disturbed by the extraordinary power of Vritrasur, they had assembled to ask Indra to kill him. Indra, however, being afraid of killing a Brahman, declined the request. Verse 5, Indra vacha Srivudruma jalereno Vishwarupa vadobadam Vibhaktam anogranadvira Vrithatyam kwa marjmayam. King Indra replied, when I killed Vishwarup, I received extensive sinful reactions, but I was favored by women, land, trees, and water, and therefore I was able to divide the sin among them. But now, if I kill Vritrasur, another Brahman, how shall I free myself from the sinful reaction? Verse 6. Sri Sukuvacha Rishiyastad Upakarnya Mahendram Idam Abruvan Yajaya Yajayashyam Bhadram Te Hayamedan Masmabhahi. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, hearing this, the great sages replied to King Indra, O King of heaven, all good fortune unto you. Do not fear. We shall perform an Ashvamedha sacrifice to release you from any sin you may accrue by killing the Brahman. So here is the assurance that was given to Indra. Next verse. Hayamedhen purusham paramatmanam ishwaram ishtva narayanam devam mokshasepi jagadvada. The rishis continued, O King Indra, by performing an Ashvamedha sacrifice and thereby pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Super Soul Lord Narayan, the Supreme Controller, one can be relieved even of the sinful reactions for killing the entire world. not to speak of killing a demon like Vritrasur. Most of these verses do not have purports in them. In verse 8 and 9, Brahmaha pitraha gogno matraha charyaha gavan swada pulakshako vapi shudreranyasya kirtana tammashvamedena mahamakhena shraddhanvito samabhiranusthena hatvapi sambram chacharam tvam nalipyase kim khala nigrena. One who has killed a Brahman, one who has killed a cow, or one who has killed his father, mother, or spiritual master can be immediately freed from all sinful reactions simply by chanting the holy name of Lord Narayan. Other sinful persons, such as dog eaters and chandals, who are less than Shudras, can also be freed in this way. But you are a devotee, and we shall help you by performing the great horse sacrifice. If you please Lord Narayan in that way, why should you be afraid? You will be freed even if you kill the entire universe, including the Brahmins, not to speak of killing a disturbing demon like Vritrasur. Right, so here we see the sages are encouraging Indra to saying that Brahmahatya is uh, uh, is not, so they're agreeing that Brahmatya is a sin, but they're saying that the reactions to the sin are nullified by the performance of Ashwamedha Yagya, because that Yagya is performed for the pleasure of the Lord. But we will see in the following verse that the sages were actually wrong. That killing a devotee cannot be the sins of killing a devotee cannot be nullified by any ritualistic performances. Prabhupada also in the purport, he talks about offenses to the holy name. He says that Ajamil did not commit sinful activities on the strength of the holy name. Also, he did not chant the holy name to free himself from sinful reaction. Right? He did not say that I'm chanting so I can perform sinful activities, nor did he think that I perform sinful activities, so let me chant to nullify the reactions. Right? Prabhupada is commenting to the fact that the sages are saying that one who kills a Brahman or the father or the mother or the guru can simply be freed from all sinful reactions by chanting the holy name of Lord Narayan. That essentially is the seventh offense. Right? So Prabhupada later on says that for such purified devotees, freedom from sinful reaction is certainly assured. This does not mean, however, that one should intentionally commit sinful acts and think himself free from the reactions because he's chanting the holy name. This is Namnu Bala Vyasyahi Papu Buddhi. The Lord's holy name certainly has the potency to neutralize. But if one repeatedly and intentionally commits sins while chanting the holy name, he is most condemned. So Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur gives examples of the kind of birth of such condemned people. Right. So he says that in the Manu Samhita, the following names are given: a son begotten by a Brahman and born from the womb of a Shudra mother is known as Parashva or Nishad, a hunter accustomed to stealing. Then a son begotten by a Nishad in the womb of a Shudra woman is called Puksh. A child begotten by a Kshatriya in the womb of a Shudra is called Ugra. And a child begotten by a Shudra and the daughter of a Kshatriya is called Kshata. A child begotten by a Kshatriya in the womb of a lower class woman is called Shwad or dog eater. All such offsprings are considered extremely sinful. But the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so strong that all of them can be purified simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Okay, next verse 10. Sri Sukuvacha evam sanchodito vipre marutvan ahanandrapum brahmatyahate tasmin asad vrishakapim. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, encouraged by the words of the sages, Indra killed Vritrasura. And when he was killed, the sinful reaction of killing a Brahman, Brahmatya, certainly took shelter of Indra. So when Vitrasur was killed, Tasmin Hate, then the sin of that killing fell upon Indra, Varshakapim. Because of committing sins on the strength of atonement, the reaction was very strong. Right? So without experiencing suffering, the atonement would not give any relief by itself. Therefore, they did not perform the horse sacrifice right away. Right? So it's not that the sages were misleading Indra, but the sages were also knowledgeable about how this whole science of action and reaction works. So they understood that because of the gravity of the sin that Indra had committed, he has to undergo suffering. But they also knew that when he had suffered sufficiently, then by the power of the atonement, the remnant of the suffering that is in store will go away. And so, in a way, the sages were also party to the sin of Indra because they had conspired along with him, saying that, encouraging him to perform a sin on the strength of atonement. Right? They're saying you kill and then we'll help you atone. Right? So they were also party to the sin of uh, uh, Indra, and also they were complicit in the sin of misleading Indra. So if they were the real well-wishers of Indra, they would have talked about the position of Vritrasur and some other way out. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that because of this, the sages also suffered. Now, does anybody know how did the sages? So this is here talking about the Saptarishis over here. Does anybody know what was the pastime which caused the Saptarishi to suffer for a long time? So let me give you a hint. So when Indra leaves the position of being the king of the Swarga, who takes the post? Okay, so this is jumping out to Mahabharata actually. When Indra left this post to do atonement, then Nahusha takes the post of Indra. And we know that Nahusha, he became extremely arrogant to the point that he would mistreat. He actually had the Saptarishis carry his palanquin on their shoulders. But before that also, he was causing a lot of tribulation there. So Srila Prabhupada writes that that Nahusha was officiating for Indra, where Indra was absent, and it was Nahusha who was causing all this. Through Nahusha, the reactions to the sages' sins was delivered. Okay, next verse 11. Taindra samasah tapam nirvitena vishat Hrimantam vachetam praptam sukyanti api no gunaha. Following the advice of the demigods, Indra killed Vritrasur, and he suffered because of the sinful killing. Although the other demigods were happy, he could not derive happiness from the killing of Vritrasur. Indra's other good qualities, such as tolerance and opulence, could not help him in his grief. Right, so pious qualities cannot give relief to a person who has done a shameful act. Right, and Indra has been criticized for killing a Brahman. So example is given that if you put sugar in milk, it becomes sweet. But if you put a drop of lemon juice, it will curdle. So regardless of how much sugar you put, one drop of lemon juice will curdle. So regardless of how much pious activities that you have done, when you perform sinful activities, you'll have to suffer for them. Right? Prabhupada says that one cannot be happy by committing sinful activities, even if one is endowed with material opulence. Indra found that to be true. People began to blaspheme, saying, this person has killed a Brahman for the sake of enjoying heavenly material happiness. Therefore, in spite of being the king of heaven and enjoying material opulence, Indra was always unhappy because of the accusations of the populace. Verse 12 and 13. ताम्रदृशानुधावन्तीं चाण्डलीमिव रूपिणीं जर्यावेपमानान्यं यक्ष्माग्रत्सामस्कृपताम् विकीर्यापलितान् केशां तिष्ठतिष्ठेति भाषणं मीनगन्धसुगन्धेन कुर्वती मार्गदूषणम्. Indra saw personified sinful reaction chasing him, appearing like a Chandal woman, a woman of the lowest class. She seemed very old, and all the limbs of her body trembled. Because she was afflicted with tuberculosis, her body and garments were covered with blood. Breathing an unbearable fishy odor that polluted the entire street, she called to Indra, wait, wait. Verse 14. Namo gato dishaha sarva sahasrako vishampate pravudichem disham turnam pravishto nripamanasam. O king, Indra first fled to the sky, but there he saw the woman of personified sin chasing him. This witch followed him wherever he went. At last, very quickly, he went to the northeast and entered the Manas Sarovar lake. Verse 15. And after that, we'll pause for any discussion. So avasat pushkar nalatantun alabdha bhogo yadihagniduta varshanya sahasram alakshitontah sanchintayan brahma vadahadimoksham. Always thinking of how he could be relieved from the sinful reaction for killing a Brahman, King Indra, invisible to everyone, lived in the lake for 1,000 years in the subtle fibers of the stem of a lotus. The fire god used to bring him his share of all yagyas, but because the fire god was afraid to enter the water, Indra was practically starving. So Vishwanath Chakravarti notes that the Devas survived on the oblations that are offered into the fire of yajna. The same point made in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So Vishwanath Chakravarti further notes that the same Agni that also carries the oblations to Varun. So Varun is the god of the underworld under the water. So the same Agni is able to carry the oblations to Varun, but was not able to carry it to Indra in Manasarovar. So, so in order to escape the woman who was sin personified, Indra had entered into Manasarovar. Then the Manasarovar is guarded by the followers of Shiva. So it was because of these Rudras the followers of Shiva, that sin personified was not able to follow Indra. That is why Indra strategically entered into this lake, because he knew that it was guarded by the followers of Lord Shiva. But the same followers of Lord Shiva also prevented Agni from entering into the lake. So in this way, starving and fearful, submerged in water, Indra suffered for 1,000 years. So the Manasarovar is created by the mind of Lord Brahma. It is considered to be pure. And bathing in Manasarovar is considered to be like bathing in Ganga. You clean your sins for many lifetimes. And it is associated with Lord Shiva and Parvati, who dwell in Mount Kailash. So according to the Skanda Purana, Manasarovar is one of the most sacred pilgrimage site. And the Manasarovar is also considered to be the source of the four great rivers, Brahmaputra, Sutlej, Indus, and Karnali. So present day Manasarovar is actually situated in Tibet at an altitude of 15,000 feet, considered one of the highest lakes in the world. Okay, so we'll stop over here, see if there are any questions or comments. Okay, if not, then we'll end here. Thank you so much for attending. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Hidai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu.